Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Robin Liu, and I'm Chairman of Cambridge Past, Present and Future. Cambridge PPF, as we call it, supports the vision shared both by the City and the South Cambs District Council to keep Cambridge as a compact city with its historic setting protected by its green belt. And as a manifestation of this solidarity, we signed a statement of common ground with both councils for the examination of their local plans that endorsed the overall spatial strategy. This strategy and its viability depends upon the provision of effective and efficient public transport systems that will link the new residential settlements with the main centres of employment around the city, and this is the issue that the inspectors have now raised concerns about. At the examination of the local plans under matters 2 and particularly matter 5, both of which Cambridge PPF gave evidence to support the councils, the source of capital for the transport infrastructure investment was questioned. And it's clear that the inspectors, particularly some of their verbal comments at that meeting, which are reflected in their letter, had concerns about the availability and reliability of the City deal funding as a material consideration in the assessment of the plans, and particularly the lack of a compelling Plan B option for alternative sources of investment if the City deal, for whatever reason, did not materialise. Cambridge PPF therefore calls on the Assembly of the City deal to work with all 3 councils to provide the inspectors with whatever evidence is required to confirm the availability of the City deal finance for the essential transport infrastructure investments. Without such assurances, there's a real likelihood that the local plans will be found unsound, and the councils will then be forced to release yet more greenbelt land around the city fringe for more urban extension. So we call on you to work with the councils to give that assurance to the inspectors, because the inspectors at the moment, are sceptical about the validity of the City deal finance as a material consideration in the examination of the local plans. This situation is urgent. When it comes to looking actually at the transport options for the Western Corridor themselves, I don't want to get involved in preferences of one option for another, but there are 2 specific things that I would like to say.
Could you draw your remarks to conclusion?
Yep, I will. Firstly, we perceive that the investment of City deal money is to support economic growth by providing the infrastructure link between where people might live and where they might work. We therefore think that this Western Corridor transport access must link into both the major centres of residential, like Cambourne and Bourne-Avenue, but also to the major employment areas. And we see it as all options as a serious deficiency, but Cambridge North West and Cambridge West are not actually on part of any of the proposed routes. Those will be major employment areas which must be served by this new corridor.
Thanks very much, Robin. In fairness to others,
can I just make one?
No, I'm sorry. We have.
Okay.
This is 4 minutes now. I think you have to stay quite disciplined. Thanks very much. We will come back to that when we get the audience together again. The next speaker is Rob Hockey.
Thank you, Chair. The NPPF requires any plan to be justified with the most appropriate strategy when considered against reasonable alternatives based on proportionate evidence. Why, therefore, is the land immediately to the south of the A428/A1303 Madingley Mulch Junction not being included as a potential park and ride site option at this initial stage of investigation? As it has not been included as an option at this initial stage, does it mean that it cannot be considered later on in the process? Now, I've sent a plan into Graham Watts, hopefully to circulate, which indicates another option for consideration. And I don't know whether or not anyone's seen that.
No.
We'll pass that round. When you see the plan, it's the land in pink, which is immediately to the south of the junction. The advantages of this site as a potential option are as follows. It is screened by existing tree belts. It is part brownfield land. It has a number of vehicular access opportunities using existing infrastructure. It is away from the American cemetery and therefore heritage assets. It is a site which can be promoted by willing landowners. It will take those vehicles unable to get into the existing Madingley Park and Ride easily without having to cross the A428. More land is potentially available, and we would like to collaborate with the county highways project managers and provide information as necessary. And we would ask the City Deal Exec Board not to rule out a viable option early on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could you just say to who we is?
The landowners are South Staffs Water and Madingley Mulch. Everyone refers to it as the Madingley Mulch roundabout, but those purple sites are not actually on Madingley Mulch, they are on other sites.
I'm a resident of West Cambridge, and these views are my own, but they also reflect the views of many residents' associations, actually in West Cambridge and in some villages and various local groups. I'm here to ask the City Assembly to not approve the further development of option 1C for the following reasons, other than the obvious fact that it costs £50 million more than the others, which I think is a significant figure. The route itself is problematic. It pierces the Coton Green corridor, which has long been established in policy as an extremely important characteristic of Cambridge, and brings open countryside into the city. Just as a bus route would not be allowed on Grantchester Meadows, it should not be allowed here, as this has also been described as sacrosanct and iconic to Cambridge. It will affect the setting of a world-class group of listed buildings and registered parks and gardens. And this has been shown in the High Court case in 2008. When the whole route is taken into account, it will probably be slower than the alternatives. Grange Road suffers from very heavy traffic. West Road and Sidgwick Avenue are completely inappropriate. I mean, Sidgwick Avenue, for example, has trees all the way up. You couldn't have cyclists go along at the same time. Queen's Road has up to 100 coaches a day at weekends in the summer. The Bats is a grade 1 park and garden, so that the setting of that could be affected. The narrow nature of Silver Street, which is again surrounded with grade 1 buildings, is such that only a single bus can go through. Once you get to Downing Street, the car parks are horrendous. You've got the sort of the big sort of city shopping centre there. Whereas the Northampton Bridge Street route is already set up for buses and is more direct. Madingley Road is also a much more appropriate for the employment sites of North West Cambridge and West Cambridge, and would link better into the orbital routes. As my closing point, I think the implications of option 1C for what has been described in the High Court and in various Greenbelt reviews as the most important location on the edge of the city, because it brings fields to within 1,000 metres of King's College Meadows, has not been properly considered. There is no detailed route, which I think is absolutely necessary for people to consider with respect to the decisions they take on this. There is no visual impact statement, which when you're talking about heritage buildings, registered parks, gardens and so forth is crucial. There are no ecological impact assessments. There are 10 protected species on that land, including things like great crested newts. By law, you have to produce these surveys in advance. And finally, it passes through a well-established floodplain. So obviously you have to consider all the different aspects, but please consider these points. Thank you.
I'm a new councillor, and I was only elected a couple of weeks ago. But the number of residents that came to me to complain about potential option 1C is unfathomable. I was asked to, on behalf of residents and people working and researching in Grange Road, in West Road, in Cranmer Road, to voice some concerns. And my final plea will be, please consider throwing out, dismissing option 1C. I think there are grave concerns, even from the high-level bird's view planning and the revised plan that was helpfully put on the website. It is very clear that option 1C pierces the green belt. And we've already heard how important the green belt is for Cambridge. It's a unique, from a sustainable development perspective, a unique piece of land, and it shouldn't be easily, especially as a floodplain, easily considered for a new route. The route into the city is hugely problematic. The considerations of the officers stop at Grange Road, but that's where the huge problems are actually starting. Grange Road is a way to school. Grange Road clogs up at certain times of the day. West Road has problems. Queen's Road has buses. And Silver Street only allows for single line traffic. And finally, thirdly, I think the concern here is that this option 1C, while it might be preferred by certain landowners, will serve as a Trojan horse in order to open up development that the city had actually dismissed a long time ago. I think those concerns should be taken very, very seriously, and alternative routes should perhaps be considered, but 1C should be dismissed. Thank you.
A lot of what I was going to say has actually been dealt with by Marcus and Stephen, so I'm not going to repeat it again, but we would agree with everything they say. The point I would like to make is that I think option 1C is confusing and potentially misleading in the way it's been represented in the report. The map is worryingly inaccurate with its representation of Coton Village, ignoring significant portions of the village extending northwards on both sides of Cambridge Road and eastwards towards the M11 along the footpath. As far as can be deduced, though, it seems to show the route superimposed over existing roads through the village. However, I think that was dealt with in the opening statements that it's going to the north of the village. However, it's misleading, so what we would like is clarification of the route as it passes or passes through the village of Coton and crosses the M11, a detailed description of any interactions between the route and any residential areas of Coton and any of the roads in or serving Coton, including Cambridge Road, High Street, Whitwell Way and the footpath, and clarification of whether the new crossing over the M11 is intended to incorporate or replace the current pedestrian bridge over the M11 at the end of the footpath. On a grander view, really, what we're asking for is accurate maps and accurate SWOT analyses, because we don't consider them to be so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Pass it to you.
Just representing Cambridge Cycling Campaign, just got one question. What consideration has been given to the outstanding commitment for a cycle route between the West Cambridge site and Central Cambridge, which was part of the Section 106 agreement for that site? Since we're discussing that this transport corridor, we should think about that as well.
So,
I think many of you may have my question in front of you. But for those of you who haven't, I've got two questions. I'll be quite brief. My first question is in relation to whether any work has been done, given the high cost of the bridge over the motorway for option 1C. I wondered whether any work had been done examining a combination of option 1B and 1C, so that there was an off-road route, so that the entire route was off-road, but there was not a need for building a new motorway bridge. The current motorway bridge has a bus route on it already. There is capacity on that bridge for a bus route to go over it. And if you then went through the West Cambridge University site and off-road again, you could have an entirely off-road route without any need for building a new bridge. And I wondered why that had not been included in any of the options. So if you could enlighten us on that later in the discussion, that would be very helpful. The second thing I wanted to know was what the impact of taking the options 1A and 1B, continuing down Madingley Road, would be on the current walking and cycling facilities at Madingley Road. There are places on Madingley Road where there is very little additional room given the current two-lane traffic and the current walking and cycling facilities. So my fear is that if you continue the bus lane right down Madingley Road, you will need to take out cycling and walking facilities which are already there. So if you could let me know, please, whether that would be one of the things that would happen under option 1A and 1B, that would be very helpful. Given some of the comments that have also been made about the difficulties of taking buses in down the Grange Road route, I absolutely recognise that there are enormous difficulties in taking buses in down the Grange Road route. I think it should also be said that there are enormous difficulties in taking them in all the way down Madingley Road, hitting the roundabout at Northampton Street. Northampton Street itself is very tight, and Bridge Street itself is already a problem. So I think both of these routes have major problems for what happens to the buses when you reach the end of the route. And I think that any consultation and any work done on the routes needs to recognise that that is a problem with both routes.
Thank you very much. The big question that he wants us to respond to.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Chair. I treat the first questions as rhetorical questions, really, to inform your debate on point 8A in the agenda. My first question is, how does an inbound-only bus lane do anything to solve congestion out of the city? Or do you value getting people to work on time above getting them home to their families on time? Does a single bus lane provide a better return in terms of economic growth and population well-being than high-quality segregated cycleways like those being built on Hills Road? Isn't shifting buses onto dedicated busways or lanes simply going to free up road space for more traffic to enter the city, exacerbating congestion, danger to pedestrians and cyclists, noise and pollution in the centre? Shouldn't the top priority for new park and ride capacity be at the A14, M11, A428 interchange, where there is an ideal site? This would remove traffic from Huntingdon Road and from the A14 to Milton Park and Ride. This question should be treated as a genuine question. Why is there no specific proposal for high-quality pedestrian and cycle links along the Cambridge to Cambourne corridor, linking with the existing park and ride site, west and northwest Cambridge developments, the Coton Cycle Path, Madingley, Hardwick, Highfields, and the Bourne Airport development if that goes ahead? Putting neighbouring communities, local schools, shops and amenities within safe walking or cycling distances reduces car use for short journeys and has valuable social and health benefits. The merits of such a proposal would stand whatever new housing developments end up in the revised local plan and whatever the consultation with traffic generators in the city concludes. We are still treating cycle and pedestrian infrastructure as something to be tacked on to road infrastructure. Dedicated cycle and footpaths that are convenient, safe and enjoyable to use always see far more use than anyone anticipates. Sustrans, the sustainable transport charity, has proven this time and again, ever since it opened the disused Bristol to Bath Railway in 1986. That 13-mile route now carries over 2.5 million journeys a year on foot and by bike.
We will try and comment where appropriate on this, although in some respects I think that we are going to be using it to inform the debate that we have shortly. And in other respects, it's possible that we're going to be saying that these are great inputs, but probably inputs to the consultation itself. But I will go through each of these and ask for the officers to comment, and where necessary, members of the Assembly as well. Although I'm trying to hold the actual debate of the Assembly until this process is finished. So, first of all, we had Robin Pellew's question, which he was really asking for us to work with our constituent councils to make sure that the funding for the city deal was secure enough to support the proposals in the local plan. Who would like to tackle that question? In a sense, we're all very committed to make sure that this funding is as secure as it can be. It does come in 3 tranches, and we only have 1 tranche at the moment. But our understanding of the route to secure tranche 2 and 3 is to deliver on our commitments in tranche 1, and if they have been targeted correctly, that they will be guaranteeing us access to tranches 2 and 3, because they will start to indicate successful economic growth in the area. That is the general intention both of the board, I understand, and of this Assembly, that we need what we have on our table at the moment to be carried out and carried out effectively. Otherwise, we then do lose the opportunity, or potentially lose the opportunity, for the later 2 tranches of funding. You're out of order. Yes, the question from Mr. Lee about the cycling pedestrian infrastructure.
Well, I mean, I've already mentioned how important that is to the overall success of the scheme. So, but whatever we do, the more we can release on what we've got in existing corridor routes, the more we can do to improve cycling, the more we can consider segregated lanes. All sorts of things can come into play if we can do that. We don't believe that, you're absolutely right to concern yourselves around the possibilities that if we do go for one particular option, the impact would be that we just create more space for cars. That certainly would not be an objective that we would look to do. We would be looking to create a much more safer environment for other forms of transport other than simply cars. So it would not necessarily mean by releasing one element of the network that we would attract others, because that would certainly not be the case in this particular study. Not sure if that captured everything there.
That was my understanding question.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So again, thank you for the public speakers. Sorry, Mr. Lee, I'd forgotten that you've been left out there. And I think we'll find that very useful as background to our discussion. So could I direct members of the Assembly to the recommendation that's before us, which is essentially about the release for public consultation of the options described in the report. And I would suggest that we framed our discussion around that proposition. And with reference to the report and what you've heard, let's do that. Sure. We've already started a list here. Roger.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. It's just a very, very brief comment to start with. It's an observation, because as soon as you put a line on a map, everyone has a look to see where that line goes. And in your own comments, you said that it's indicative. Now, obviously, when you're online on the road, that is a line. But when you're going north and south, maybe you could consider, when we go out for consultation, some sort of broad corridor sweeping south and a little one sweeping north. just so that people know that it's actually not the line, but it's the idea of the north and the south. I think that could actually fend off a few fears of people seeing something going past their front door. Okay, thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. Right, a few points I'd like to make. At the outset, Stuart said he wanted our views on the paper, not for us just to discuss whether to approve this going to consultation. So I'm doing views on paper. Right, just the first point I'd like to make is that I did request that we be provided with a map showing the impact of these proposals on the green belt. I'm very disappointed that hasn't been forthcoming, because obviously from the questioning we've had, that is very important to most people. So I did ask, as soon as the papers came out, if we could have this map showing where the green belt was. So that's the point I'd like to make. I'd just like to respond to the point I wanted to make, I wasn't able to Stephen Coates in relation to 1C. I think you need to realise that cutting a swathe through the green belt with a busway actually is more damaging than it seems just as that. Because what it actually, in my view, what it actually potentially does is open the doors for development by creating roadlocked areas of land. So I think this is far more of a risk to the green belt than just cutting a whopping great busway through it. Because I think it will become increasingly difficult, if that goes ahead, to then argue against developing these areas of land that then become completely encompassed by it. So, you know, I think it's an even bigger issue than one perhaps appreciates at the outset. So if I may continue, please. I'm quite concerned about this paper. There does seem to be some bias here. We seem to have a huge appetite for building busways. And I fear that option 1A is there purely to provide a baseline, albeit a baseline that actually delivers by far the biggest saving in journey time, cutting, where were we? 7, 8 minutes off the journey time, far more significant than the other two, which actually merely add an additional 1 or 2 minutes to it. So 1A is the one that delivers all the improvements in journey time. However, the disadvantage of it is that by putting a busway in along Madingley Road, we are obviously wipe out walking and cycling, which is not something that we want to do in South Cambridgeshire. So within Cambridge City. So I would like to propose that what possibly goes forward to the board is a sort of beefed up version of 1A, which includes a dedicated cycleway, perhaps to follow the route of the busway in 1C. Because cycleways, I believe, are about 150,000 a kilometre. This could also include high-quality park and cycle at the 2 park and ride sites, which we don't have at the moment. That would allow people either to bring their bike in their car, it could allow them to hire a secure lock-up to leave their bike, or even, let's be radical about this, hire a bike, which would hopefully appeal to all tourists. So I would like us, please, to look at the beefed-up version of option 1A, to have a cycleway as well. And I know, I've had emails just this week, people feel very strongly about it still being allowed to cycle along Madingley Road, but as a compromise solution, this would still give us a route to give the walk and cycle in. And I believe my colleague here, who knows the area very well, tells me that actually there are existing footpaths for quite a lot of that distance as it is. And the last point I would like to make is regards to the number 2 options, which are more busways from Caxton Gibbet through to Camborne and to facilitate travel to St Neots. Now I checked Stagecoach bus timetable last night. The only buses, as I can see, running from Cambridge to St Neots is the X9, 2 an hour. So that's 4 buses an hour running on a multi-million-pound busway. The only other bus I can find is the number 18, which until recently went from Cambridge to St Neots, but now terminates in Camborne. So I think there are 4 at peak period and 3 of those outside peak periods. So we are talking about 6 buses an hour running in each direction on a multi-million-pound busway. What are we thinking about here? Undoubtedly, if we develop all these areas, there will be other buses. But are there actually going to be enough buses to justify a multi-million-pound busway? I think we need to think about it. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Birkett.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, can I just address some of the public questions? And I think one way of answering them Chairman, might be to point everybody, and perhaps our members as well, to page 30 of our agenda pack. I'll just wait till everybody turns that up, because there's a useful link there that you'll see at the top of page 30, which will give you that document. We paid and commissioned the document by W.S. Atkins, which is a very good read and answers quite a lot of the questions that the questioners have posed. It doesn't sort of give you the pro and anti, but it just gives you the factual basis to a lot of the questions. Now, it was regrettable that this paper only came out on Monday, rather than, so when it says the following document was used, it wasn't really because of the timescale. So we might obviously think about the juxtaposition of publication for the future. But I think if members of the public read that, it gets you, it's a good paper and it gets you quite up to speed. So I commend that to everybody.
Thank you.
Chairman, I did if I can now move on to the debate and our main purpose. I'm just going to hand these round to members. You've seen a previous version of this from me by email, and this is really bringing us on to our job as an assembly, our terms of reference and our job as an assembly is to provide advice to the board. And to simplify this, I thought I would type out the advice that I would propose that we give to the board. Members might want to take some of this away or add to it, but just to simplify everybody, this is the advice that I would like to propose to give. On the left-hand side is the draft advice, and on the right-hand side in italics is just a very brief explanation. I talked to the Chairman about this last night. Chairman, what would you like me to do? Take us through it bit by bit, or all at once, or how?
What you're proposing here has included within it the recommendations that we've got on the officer's report. So your first line is that we should note, approve and agree the recommendations in 2.1 in the report. So that much is common ground between the recommendation and what you're proposing. And then you're proposing a number of other things, some of which also relate to this project, and some of which are sort of tangential to the project. What I think might be sensible is, having tabled this now, that we have a discussion about the recommendations, and then we come back to the points that you would like to add to that. If that makes sense. Thank you. So I have Claire Ruskin down as next.
So two simple questions, I hope. One is that if we're looking at Appendix 2 and looking at approving that, consultation, I assume, will ask for better suggestions, and that will cover many of the questions from the public. And I assume that is a normal part of the consultation. It's not just the 6 options, it's also plus any better suggestions. Yep. And secondly, it mentions on page 37 of our pack that we should ensure that we separate these schemes from the 848 duelling. And I would suggest that that's actually very relevant as part of the increased traffic that we might see. And therefore would suggest that rather than separating that, that is included as part of the explanation of the way forward.
Okay. Thank you. Jane?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask about weighting, which I know was a big theme in the first meeting that we had around trying to make decisions about what schemes we as an assembly were going to recommend that were pursued. But has someone worked out some taxonomy or criteria for how we address sensible proposals as we go along, but that might impact either favourably or unfavourably on things that we have also agreed? So I am particularly interested in, all of it obviously, but I'm particularly interested in paragraph 4.11 and the impact positively or otherwise potentially on the Western Orbital. And so how will that be framed in how we go forward? Because I obviously want to be very supportive of a plan which did not impact adversely on that orbital proposal, although that's been dealt with separately. So it's two things. How do we look at no. How do we ensure that in deciding this or whatever else is in front of us doesn't impact adversely on other proposals that we've already agreed we want to pursue?
Thank you.
I would support that. I do think before we get too involved in other things, we really need to look outer ring all around Cambridge to take pressure off the middle and to make it easy. There are many junctions that could be improved. I think we need a road from the Quay A14 junction through to Addenbrooks via the Gogs direct. I wouldn't come in as far as airport very personally. I'd make it bigger than that. I think some of the junctions need looking at so you can actually join up. Like if you're going out on the A14, you can't turn right on the M11, on the A11 when you get up towards Newmarket. The junction we're talking about on the Madingley one, you can't take a left off the M11 onto it. You're coming south, you've got your right at Barton all the way back again. These are all things, if we get these right, I think somebody should be commissioned to look at the outer requirements for Cambridge, the orbital requirements. That would take pressure off the centre, and you might be able then to put other things near those orbital places, roads, which would actually take further pressure off by providing housing, shopping, and so on, so people wouldn't have to go into the centre.
Thank you. No.
Consultation. How far are we going to go for getting responses to the consultation? I mean, are the people in Campbell going to be asked what they think about the proposals? I mean, it's great to have so many people here representing their communities and so on, and other audience, but obviously it's clear where these folk have come from. They're generally seem to be from the west side of the city. I was just interested to know if we're going to include the population beyond the city boundaries, and because looking at the proposals, and it has been mentioned, there has been an emphasis on getting a fast public transport from Camborne and the other villages on the way through to Cambridge. So I think these people need to be involved. Talking about the three options, I was actually very heartened to see option 1C, because I think we as an assembly, when we first met, I mean, the message I heard was that we're going to have to be bold if we're going to have a positive effect in preserving Cambridge under the pressure of the growing population. And looking at what is being presented to us today, I keep in mind what I think is generally agreed is the success of the guided busway from St Ives in through to Cambridge. And I think my view at the moment, I'm open to persuasion. I'm very pleased to hear so many constructive comments from people. My view is that 1C is actually a very good, brave approach to the potential problems of congestion, pollution that this city is facing now and is going to face even more in the future. And I think we should take the guided busway with its attendant cycleway as a model to follow, and just look at all the people who are using those buses, using the cycleway, and also the pedestrians who are using that route, and just see how we can repeat that on the south side of the city. Yes, there are major concerns about the landing point into the streets of Cambridge. Absolutely. But we've got to see the bigger picture throughout all of this. And I was very pleased to see the suggestions for improving the networks of cycleways, which would encourage people to actually leave their cars behind and use cycles to get around, which, as we all know the benefits of this. We need to have a holistic approach to the future of Cambridge and its surrounding areas, and I'm pleased that this debate has started here with the input from for the people who've turned up here, but I think we also need to broaden that input.
Thanks very much. Morris Lee, and then Helen Valentine.
I'm not sure if the SWOT analysis on page 31 is intended to form part of the consultation. I notice on option 1A of the three threats is the loss of cycloimmunity on Madingley Road. I would have thought it was a weakness rather than a threat, but whichever category you put it in, it must also appear in option 1B, because they both use precisely the same piece of road to go along, and it's something that we should certainly not lose sight of. I have a lot of disagreement, I'm afraid, with Noel Kavanagh about the guided busway, and I'm very relieved to see that in the papers we're referring to a bus road rather than a guided busway. But I think the comments that Mr. Lee made in his question, number 2 on the paper, about the absence of reference to cycling and pedestrian facilities along the Route 2 options is a grave omission. And I would hope that in the consultation we can refer to the possibility of having those facilities alongside the bus road, because that is definitely one of the successes of the guided busway, that there is that facility.
Thank you. Helen?
I think I wanted to echo Councillor Kavanagh really, that I feel that the city deal allows us to look at perhaps more radical options than would otherwise have been the case, and that certainly at this very early stage we should kind of look at a wide range of options. I can see that there are clear problems with 1C, but I wouldn't want to rule it out at this stage.
Could you just have clarification on whether it is a busway or a bus road? Because there are references to busways in the paper, and I didn't know whether that was a guided busway or a road.
Sorry, I didn't mean to give forward the idea I was supporting there's a guided busway. It's a bus route. I was just using the busway as an example of how you can get public transport directly.
Yeah, but it's still a valid question, so yes, it's a valid question. Okay, I'm just thinking that perhaps it would be good to collect some of the answers that officers have really been invited to give to some of those points. If I could just run through my list of those. We had a question about the request for a map showing the impact on the green belt.
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't realise that was available, but certainly that would be included as part of future plans.
How would you treat the point about Councillor Smith wanted to consider beefing up an option by sort of adding a great cycleway specifically associated with one of the options 1A? How do you see that being treated now? Is that something that has to be changed in the way we present options now, or is that the sort of thing that is input to the consultation when we launch it?
That is all part of the consultation. That's the sort of information that we look at. There are existing infrastructure around the cycling. The opportunity exists for us to consider and connect all that. So it's as useful information for us to take that. We certainly consider that as part of this, but I can't comment on what you said.
I just feel that we should, with all these options, we've got to put forward the best version of each option to the public. It's not fair to give them a kind of denuded option when very small addition could make it so much better. So the cycling lobby are already emailing me saying 1A is a disaster because it means we can't cycle. Well, it's not. To present them with the beefed up version, addresses their main concern and will make them look at that. So I would just like the best version of each option put forward, and I don't think we're doing that on 1A. I think we're deliberately giving an option that is unattractive because there seems to be an appetite for bus routes.
Okay. The next one I have on my list is about the disparity between the services that are currently run on the A428 and the extent of the project for options 2A to 2C.
Yeah, tranche 2 is, as I said, quite a long way off. I mean, it's all about connectivity again. Part of the study that I'm taking is predicting the land use modelling, the dynamics that we're using, and the idea about trends and what the likelihood is and patronage increases, all being looked at as part of these options. Indications are it's going to increase quite a lot. So, the case starts to become much more interesting as we start to move forward on this. So, you're right, there are strategic routes, and aware of those, the X5 is one of them, but these, we're talking about connectivity, how do you get those routes into those settlement areas, and that's crucially what this is about.
I think it's also important to say here that the second tranche of options, 2A, 2B and 2C, are not at this point funded in our programme. So that this is something that we specifically wanted to wait to see whether the case for those options was validated. What we're being asked to do is just consult on them as part of this process,